This is a product review of Adobe XD. To give you a little bit of background on where this product demo is going, my experience is about 2 decades as a graphic designer and web developer using Adobe products. And since I haven't used other wireframing software, I don't really have a point of comparison as far as feature sets and capabilities. Also, keep in mind that I'm going to be focusing mainly on features for this review, not necessarily process. Page setup is pretty straightforward in Adobe XD. You just click the artboard tool and you've got a ton of presets for standard viewport sizes for web and mobile. Keep in mind that those presets only account for the actual width and height of a viewport, so you're probably just going to want to make sure you have vertical scrolling turned on for all your artboards. You can also rename your artboards by double-clicking on the title. The Assets panel behaves pretty similarly to other Adobe software, particularly Illustrator, where you can have a collection of smart objects, namely things like colors, character styles, and other reusable objects like, say, for example, if you want to have a submit button that is going to appear in multiple parts of your website. There are a number of ways that you can add colors to your Assets panel. You can manually enter supported standard web color models such as hexadecimal, HSB, or RGB. The color panel also has an eyedropper tool that gives you the capability to pick colors from anywhere on your screen. For this demo, I'm picking colors right off of my website with the eyedropper tool. Objects can be imported one at a time into the Assets panel, or you could select a group of swatches and import them as a batch and rearrange as needed. I'm also going to add a couple of variations of my H2 tag. There are a bunch of different ways you can add objects to the Assets panel, either with the plus button within the Assets panel, through the contextual menu from the object, or a key command. XD's guides and smart guides behave pretty similarly to the way they do in InDesign and Illustrator. Let's say, for example, you're replicating the desktop layout of a Bootstrap template. The desktop web page preset is 1920 pixels, and a Bootstrap template will typically include a container style that gets centered on the page at 1170 pixels wide. And the easy way to do that is to just create a rectangle at 1170 pixels, using your smart guides, center it on the artboard, and then dragging from the left, pull guides to each side of that rectangle to create guides. That way you can align all your objects, and that'll give your layout parity with any Bootstrap template you may be working with. One odd layout quirk with guides is that you cannot drag them from the edge if you have guides hidden. Adding objects to a web page only requires a basic understanding of graphics software. Since I'm doing a quick mock-up of my existing website for this demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and skip through that process, but I'll point out a few things. Essentially, I'm working with the rectangle tool, the ellipse tool, type tool, and importing a couple of font awesome icons. So now that we have a basic website layout, I can point out one awesome thing about assets. If you change an asset in the panel, in this case a color swatch, every instance of that color on your artboard will update automatically. XD's text editing function does have a few oddities. So for example, I'm going to draw a text box here and just input some copy pasted text, blow it up so that you can see what's going on here. So one thing, for example, is unlike every other Adobe application, there are no key commands for text alignment. You have to do that from the text panel, which is shocking that they would overlook something like that. Now here in this example, I'm changing a couple of text colors. You could think of that in terms of, for example, if you have a span tag and you change the style of an individual object within a container, while you can change the color of individual words, sentences, whatever, inside of a container like you would with a span tag, for some reason you can't change the text alignment of an individual paragraph. So those are just a couple of examples of user interface inconsistencies that I found within XD and as compared to other Creative Cloud software. And as far as keeping their products consistent across the Creative Cloud suite, I think Adobe is slipping on a banana peel. Now I'm just going to set up a few objects to demo the repeat grid function. Setting a repeat grid is really simple. You just select a group of objects and click the repeat grid button in the properties panel. This is actually a pretty cool feature. What makes the repeat grid pretty advantageous for producing wireframes is that you can dynamically adjust the content of the individual objects within the grid, or horizontal and vertical margins between objects, and adapt that to your layout on the fly. For this example, I'm replicating the portfolio section of my website with basic rectangles. As an example, in the second row, of course, there's only one object, and with the repeat grid, you cannot remove those objects without destroying the whole grid. In this scenario, a step and repeat copy paste function would probably be more suitable, which is a feature that InDesign and Illustrator have had for quite a while, but XD unfortunately does not. XD has another useful layout function called responsive resizing. I'm keeping it pretty basic for this demo, so I'm just showing it on a button, but you'll quickly see how useful this function is for a full page responsive layout. Responsive resizing has some intelligence to it. So for example, the icons will adhere to the edge that they're adjacent to, and the word email's position will adjust proportionately to the object that it's closest to. When objects are grouped together, they'll be treated as one unit, so the padding will stay uniform between the two objects, and as you resize, they'll stay positioned to their adjacent edge. Now, moving on to some missing features. There is a preferences option in the menu, although it's grayed out. After some investigation, I discovered that XD does not have application preferences. It appears that Adobe plans on including this quote-unquote sometime in the future. But in the meantime, if you look at their forums, they have some very frustrated customers. So it's amazing to me that they didn't just omit preferences from the menu to eliminate some confusion. A big part of XD's workflow has to do with prototyping wireframes, where you add links between web pages that can also be turned into an interactive demo. It's a great feature, except that it's missing capabilities. Two that are absent are anchor links and hover states. Again, if you look at Adobe's forums, you're going to find a lot of comments from customers who are frustrated with their failure to add capability that's fundamental to website interactivity. So as of August 2019, you still cannot create an interactive demo of a desktop website with Adobe XD. To summarize, I think it's pretty decent and hands down better for wireframing than traditional graphics software. However, XD has been in public release for 3 years and it's still not fully capable of wireframing websites. And even though it's below acceptable standards compared to the rest of the Creative Cloud and basic website user interface requirements, Adobe for some reason offers it for sale. On the plus side, XD has a low learning curve, and I got the hang of most of its capabilities after fiddling around with it for a couple of days. Adobe does offer a limited trial version, so you at least have the opportunity to see if it meets your needs without investing much time or resources into it. For my purposes, I'd rate it as good enough for now. It does have some well thought out features, but overall it feels like functional beta software. All things considered, Adobe should not offer XD for sale or as part of the Creative Cloud until its flaws are fixed.